As you approach the gaming table, the figure of a monster takes shape. More than anything, this creature wants to be the one and only, and makes characters like the Super Ninja Warlock who beat up Palor, and the Barbarian Lizardman with frying pan hands. What stands before you is none other than the rare and special Snowflake player. What do you do?
I use Charm Monster.
Invariably, there's some sort of figurative monster rearing its ugly head in our tabletop games. It's rare that we can slay these beasts outright, so instead, we use Charm Monster.
So, Tim, what do you think about Superman?
I used to like Superman a lot, a ton, when I was, in 9th and 10th grade. He was probably my favorite hero, and I would collect those, like, bumper stickers from Hot Topic when I'd sneak in there.
Well, I used to read a lot of Superman, but the comic that I loved, one that, like, just really did it for me, as far as Superman went, was The Death of Superman. And do you know why?
Because it had a really well-drawn blood.
Well, that was a lot of it. Oh boy,
I loved the art in The Death of Superman, and I had an experience with that growing up. I had the issues, the separate issues, and so yeah. Why do you think though?
But here's the thing: the reason I bring it up is because that moment when Doomsday punches him for one of the first times, and you see blood, Superman's blood. I think that's a big deal, and the reason I think that's a big deal is because Superman, before that, was basically perfect. There were certainly conflicts, but it was never a matter of how is Superman going to solve this problem. It was, when is Superman going to solve this problem?
Yeah.
And I bring that up today because every once in a while, a player, at my table or in some games I see, they try to make what is more or less a Superman. Or sometimes I've heard them referred to as Mary Sue.
Yeah.
Where the idea is this person comes to the table with seemingly the solution to every problem, and they're also, it's almost as though they are better than everyone else. They grew up in the town that was destroyed, and the wolves raised them, and then they created the new language, and they're the only one that knows magic. And all I'm thinking is, what kind of adventure am I going to run, and how is it going to be fun for anyone else if it's not a matter of how you're going to solve the problem, it's when?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I also think it's a good point to make that you're not the main character in a tabletop RPG.
Yeah.
But we experience fantasy typically through other media, books, movies, but especially like fantasy books. So I can see where this rare and special Snowflake thing kind of creeps in, because you think you're the main character. And while you might be for your world, and the story that you have in your background, when you sit down at a table with several people, you are all the main characters of that story equally.
Exactly.
Including the game master.
Yeah.
So I think you're making a really good point.
Well, but in the same respect, I see what you mean by, you aren't the main character. I do feel that it is very important to understand that you share the spotlight and the plot with everyone else.
Correct.
To some degree. But even more importantly, I think, even some main characters are very flawed, and there are times you don't know if they're A, going to make it at all, or B, how they will, when they do. And
those are my favorite kind.
Exactly.
Those are my favorite kind.
And I feel like some of my favorite characters in movies or books, and we can definitely go with fantasy here, are the ones that they are not cut out for this situation. They are usually in the wrong place at the wrong time, or otherwise they're the only thing, they're what everybody needs because nobody else is what they are.
Luke Skywalker.
Exactly. Frodo Baggins. Bilbo Baggins. It's the idea that it's not necessarily that I think that everybody should make a character that is unwilling, but the idea is that whether or not you're an adventurer, a Dungeons and Dragons adventure for me, or really any fantasy role-playing, hell, any role-playing game, your character needs to be good at something, or the game is not going to be interesting. But your character needs to be bad at something, or the game is not going to be interesting.
That's a really good way to put it. So, a rare and special snowflake, as we're describing right now, these players who are, I guess, a way to describe and define it right now, based on what you're just saying, they want to be good at everything.
Exactly.
That is one definition. That's one way. If you're like, well, what are they talking about? Well, we're talking about, as we said, when you're starting to run a game, whether it's you're playing online, in a one shot, or if you're running a home game, when the character concept is too good to be true.
Exactly.
It's too many things that you excel at and are awesome at and are perfect at. And so that to me is the definition. It's someone who doesn't want to be bad at anything.
Exactly. Or even more, sort of to add another facet to it, somebody that has such a storied and, crazy life as a character that, they've learned, all of these things from that time they studied with the monks and they did all of these things, when their village was attacked and they were taken in by the warlord that saw something in them. It starts to, if you have a character that is so good at everything, or has been, the object of so many adventures, we'll say, there's not much room to grow when you're in that adventure.
Then why is your homeless behind a level 3?
Exactly. If you've been through all that, how are you only level 3?
And that's what I always bring it back to is you have to marry, obviously you have to marry the mechanics with the story, or else we're just telling stories to each other, which is fine if that's what everybody's in for. But
exactly.
When I sit down to play a tabletop RPG, these rules govern my challenges. But I always think, I asked you to make a level 2 character. How many years did you spend in this village learning the sacred art of this, and then you went over to another village and learned how to, bite metal rods in half with your fiery teeth? And it's like, especially one of the things that I think is hilarious is when people ask if they can house rule a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's level 2. What do you want to do? We're like, well, can I replace, instead of just attacking with a sword, can I also have a bite attack that does as much damage as my sword? And I'm like, yeah, we could do that. I mean, that's just, we're going to reskin it. You're saying you want to have your bite attack act as your sword. Well, no. Obviously, since I would have a bite attack so strong, I would like 2 attacks on each round.
Exactly.
What? You're level 2, bro?
Yeah, listen, maybe when we get to level 6 and 7 and you get some of the really cool things for your class, we can maybe revisit this. And
yeah, you're hitting wolves with sticks at this point.
Yeah.
You're in the start zone.
So the important thing is, how do you deal with that? First, we'll say, as when you're creating a character, how do you know if you're getting too out of hand? Your character still has to be cool, but how do you know if you're creating that Mary Sue, that good at everything, how do you know? So, I guess that the way that it's actually the saddest part is most of the time they don't know. Yeah. What are some signs?
No, and I'm bringing that up because I started thinking and I thought, the biggest problem with players who do this is they don't realize they're doing it.
Yeah.
They don't realize that, they send me a special IM that's 8 paragraphs about how they want this to be different than the rules, and they created a new race, and there's a new continent that they came from, so they're rich. And it's like, they don't realize that this is actually cutting themselves off at the knees to show character growth.
Exactly.
Because they have nothing to aspire to.
Yeah.
So let me go back to your question. You said, what are some signs that this is happening?
Well, what I mean is okay, so if I'm sitting down and say you're running a campaign for me, and I sit down and you're like, hey, this is a really cool campaign, you can choose any of the regular classes and stuff. So I'm like, all right, I want to be a Dragonborn. But you want something cool, you want something to be awesome, but I wonder when it is that gets out of hand, And
it's when you add a second thing that's awesome, and a third thing that's awesome.
Well,
and and let's define awesome. What do you mean? When you sit down and you say, okay, I don't want to be a rare and special snowflake, but I want to be awesome. what do you mean? Because you are still, let's assume we're making a level 3 or lower level, but not starting level character for any game system.
Well, now, here's the important thing, and that's my personal opinion on it, is the problem can be when you add multiple things, but I feel like that is a multiplication of the problem. I think that the problem originally starts when you take one thing and you make your character's influence on the world too broad. So if I say my Dragonborn, my level 3 Dragonborn was the best sword fighter in his village, well, that's not that bad. I mean, maybe my village wasn't very good at sword fighting, but that can become a character moment, because maybe my character thinks he's the best in the world, when really he's just never come up against an opponent that was so strong.
Sure.
Now, the flip side of that is, I'm the best swordsman in the world, or on the continent, or you can even make the region smaller, but no matter what, if it's that large, if your backstory has that much influence on the world, it's troubling. Because unless you're making a very epic character that's been through a lot, you have to be careful with how much, so if you are, say, like, you're the chief of a tribe, it's like, well, that creates certain problems in the game, because why are you leaving your tribe, and are they going to be there to help you? And, suddenly it's like making yourself the king of a place. It's like, well, no, you should live somewhere, but I feel like when your influence grows too much, it can become a little too snowflakey.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. So let's visit that exact example you used and talk about, well, what would change? Well, I've learned what I find fulfilling in a character. And this is in a book, this is in a film, in television, in a commercial.
Yeah.
Characters who grow or change. And, typically we call this a character arc, but I'm talking about these little character arcs.
Exactly.
Little shifts and little changes. And it doesn't have to be drastic, but I like it when a character starts out not being able to do something and then achieves it.
Exactly.
And the journey that they go on. So let's take this exact example. So what if you are the second best swordsman in your village?
That makes it a lot better.
Why?
Because, and it comes back to what you said, you like when a character grows, and when you're creating a character, even if I was creating a level 10 character, you need to build in room to grow to some degree.
Because it's fulfilling. And I can't even describe all the reasons. Joseph Campbell has scads of words.
Yeah, exactly.
He has a thick book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, and there's a lot of different studies on this. But let me show you how I would do that in game. If my character were the second best, everyone that hit him, every fight, every combat, he would see the first best swordsman.
Exactly.
Like when the goblin, pierced his side with the spear, he'd be like, and all he thought was of Gaharl Clanless.
Exactly.
That's, and I would think, he's better than me. And then that one moment, and I would probably do it when I leveled up. Like,
yeah.
Not in game, but like my character leveled up to say 3 or 4. I would choose a character moment where I felt like I had gotten stronger, and I would make it so that something that did defeat me before I overcame.
Exactly. Now, here's the important part. This might be cheesing it up a little, but if I were the GM and that was your thing,
you'd send me back to the village.
Or I would send him into your path. If it made sense, I would find that first best swordsman, quote unquote. I would find a reason for him to be where you are, and not necessarily to fight you. I mean, he's not necessarily evil.
No, I wouldn't. You wouldn't fight him. You'd have to save him.
Exactly, and I'm like, that is a character moment.
Because you have grown and it's showing. That's cool.
So let's look at that same situation. If you're the best swordsman in the region, you're the best swordsman on the continent. There's no character moments when you're getting hit. There's no time that you have a chance to show your character's flaws and the conflict in him. And then you're just saving a random NPC. All of the same events took place, but none of them have the same weight. And I would even dare say none of them have any weight for your character.
Right. Because you didn't earn it.
And building in, every time you add a flaw or don't make your character good at something, you're able to build in room to grow, whether it's a little bit of room to grow or a lot of room to grow. And again, okay, let's come back to Superman.
Yeah.
Superman, I'm sure, in the thousands of things that's been written about Superman, he's gone back to Krypton, or he's done this, or he's done that. He saved, a Kryptonian comes and he saves them, and it's a big deal. But again, if we go back to that, my favorite Superman stories are the ones where he's having trouble. And not because I like to see Superman get beat up, but because, like I said, in The Death of Superman, that comic was so cool because you're like, oh man. Because Superman is the best example of the beating up Worf trope. Because if a guy shows up and beats up Superman, you're like, all right, clearly this guy, is pretty big.
Right. And so for anybody listening, on tvtropes.com, the trope is, I think it's actually called beating up Worf.
Exactly.
In Star Trek The Next Generation, to show you that a dude was extra tough, like within the first act, he would get into an altercation with Worf and like flip him over. And you'd be like, oh, if he can beat up Worf, okay.
Exactly.
He's a bad dude. So beating up Superman is like the ultimate beating up Worf.
Yeah, and then of course, to beat up Worf earlier in that comic, before Superman faces him fully, I believe that Doomsday beats up the entire Justice League that's in the area.
Dude, he super does.
I'm pretty sure he punches Booster Gold into a different state.
Yeah, he does.
If I remember correctly. So the idea being that it's not, especially in a collaborative storytelling game, whether it's Dungeons and Dragons or Fate or whatever game you're playing and whatever setting you're playing, to me, it's fulfilling if your character can grow, because it means a lot more when you do stuff. If it's just a matter of, well, let's see what the strongest thing you can kill is, it's not as fulfilling. It's cool. It is fulfilling to roll high on the dice and to really, hit something really hard, but I don't know, it just doesn't have the same weight for me.
It doesn't. And that's like, so I play in a game, an online game called The Provokers. And it's on, if you go to YouTube, it's A Fistful of Dice, and he has a Provokers, I think, a video playlist. But I'm playing a paladin named Durgan Bloodmountain. And I decided early on that I was going to not play the typical knight in shining armor who's competent.
Exactly.
I decided that I was going to play, because this was what was interesting to me. I played a paladin who doesn't really know the deity very well, but wants retribution, so kind of made this pact with the deity, like, okay, this is your thing, well, it's my thing too, and so immediately there's not this ultimate connection. He's not some stalwart, faithful, acolyte.
Yeah, he's not the paladin archetype that you know and love.
I purposefully made him, he doesn't know super much about the deity. But I thought that was more interesting.
Exactly.
So there's another player in the group who, it's Braswick Feeblehammer, who worships Ilmater. He's a cleric. He is a devout cleric.
Exactly.
So there's this interesting dichotomy, because my character, I made it so that he's not a great paladin in the paladin-y sense. Even to the point to where when this other character, Braswick, starts talking about his faith and religion, Durgan just kind of backs down and is like, yeah, whatever he says, like, I don't really believe all this stuff. I'm just, because my ultimate goal for the character is for him to slowly turn into that paladin.
Exactly. You're level what now? Maybe 5?
6. We just hit 6 last session, I think.
So it's the kind of thing where as these things unfold, you'll eventually be able to show these character moments, whereas otherwise you would completely lose that if you started out as that stalwart paladin.
Yeah. Even to the point to where it's like when he uses his summon steed, I made it look really awful. Like, I made it look like a claymation, like the way that it looks, it almost looks like these like intestines and stuff growing out of the air. It's like really horrible to watch. Like he's doing it badly.
Yeah, it wasn't that really cool scene of like a enormous like warhorse comes like down the hallway just out of nowhere.
Like I whistle and then gold dust shoots from like around the corner.
Exactly. It's like, no, people that saw this thought, like, what is he doing?
I even made it so that the ram looks kind of like the character.
Oh, yeah.
So that it's like, you can almost see this parallel. The point to what I'm saying is, I guess the anti-snowflake, like what kills a rare and special snowflake, how do you make sure? It's flaws.
That's the number one thing.
Give yourself one flaw for every one cool thing you think you're... I mean, no, that's probably bad. I can't swim, and I can't read, and I smell.
Well, and that brings up another point, because like you said at the beginning, people don't always know they're doing it, but the important thing is, there's actually, I think, a test to see if you're a Mary Sue online. But the important thing is, you shouldn't be, in my mind, you shouldn't necessarily be the right choice for whatever adventure you're going on. Yeah. You know, it's like
the fish out of water kind of.
Yeah, and again, you don't have to not be an adventurer. You know, you don't have to be the farmer turned paladin. What I'm saying is, you shouldn't be the perfect guy for the situation.
Oh, you need a bounty hunter? My family was killed by orcs, and I've trained since I was 6.
Yeah, it's like
okay, that's kind of cool.
The idea is, if you use that as the reason you're going on the adventure, make sure there's something else that is like, well, yeah, you know, my village was slain by orcs, and I've trained my whole life.
No.
Okay.
Here, you want to really make this adventure immediately awesome? Same exact thing. My adopted father is a half-orc and really keeps to all the orcish stuff, and I know some actual orcs. Like, and you're sending me to kill orcs.
No, Tim. I got orc friends. This ain't racist.
I got orc friends? What are you talking about? You wanted a good orcs, though. I'm talking about all those other long teeth.
Oh, God.
The point I'm making, though, is that immediately turning from the trope of, yes, I will avenge these people because my family was killed by orcs. It's like, oh, man, I have to avenge these people because what these orcs did was wrong.
Exactly.
But I also understand how these orcs can be misunderstood and are actually, some of them are really good.
Yeah. So again,
so I'm sorry to interrupt your whole point.
That's perfect. That makes perfect sense, because what I'm trying to get at is make it more real. Situations are not as cut and dry as they can be when you create a character. You know, give it more facets. So again, take another example where, like you said, okay, you are the best at something. You know, you are like the perfect, but maybe you don't want to be. Maybe you are the best swordsman in the village, but that's not what you had in mind. You know, you always imagine yourself being a bard. It's like, so you still get to be the best swordsman, but the fact that your character maybe isn't in love with that idea,
I think it's great,
is really cool. And again, it opens up those really cool character moments.
See, I knew this guy, and he still is. He's one of the best artists I've ever known. Like, he can draw with a ballpoint pen and make it look like a photograph.
Yeah.
And I've always in awe of the guy's art. And he always wanted to be a guitar player.
That's crazy.
And he was mediocre at guitar. He wasn't bad, but he was not great.
He wasn't as good at guitar as he was at drawing.
Not at all. Art. And he would practice guitar all the time. He just didn't have the rhythm necessarily, or that natural...
Yeah, the talent. You know what I mean? Like that raw, natural thing that's
that he clearly had
for
buckets
art.
Up for art.
Exactly.
So there's an interesting character right there.
So I guess that's the important thing, is it's becoming very difficult for me to quantify exactly what I think. But the important thing is, if you look at your character, and like I said, their influence over the area is very large, or, you know, in the way that they are the best at something, or, you know, they are praised by many people, or, like you said earlier, if there are a lot of little things, little stories about your character, like, oh, from this time in my life, I was this, or this time in my life is when I was on the fishing boat with, you know, and we hunted the biggest whale. It's actually a really cool idea. But the idea is, if you did that, and you learned, you know, martial arts from a monk, and it's, when you're piling on, it's like, no, just dig more into that one thing.
Yeah, dig deeper, not wider.
You can have you can have a really cool character idea, and it doesn't necessarily, like, if you just stick to one thing, you know, again, it's becoming very hard to quantify.
No. Let's draw an analogy to food. If you start mixing styles of food, it usually doesn't go as well as you would expect.
And it certainly doesn't go as well as if you split those things up and had them separate.
Correct. So keep with a flavor, keep with a tone, keep with a concept. Just like you would piece together a menu and make a really good meal, do that same thing with a character. Don't say, okay, we're going to do all this Italian, and then all of a sudden there's burritos.
Yeah, it's like, all right, we're doing all this Italian, but I make a really killer burrito, so we're going to do that as well. But on the burrito, I'm not very good at making black beans, but I make this killer I want to say red sauce, but it should be different than Italian. You know, I make a killer béarnaise sauce. I'm like, no.
I make a killer tikka masala, like Indian tikka masala.
Yeah, those things are all really good separately. But if you start mixing it all together, first of all, there's way too much, because who can eat a whole lasagna, 3 burritos, and a, you know, whatever that other thing I said was.
A whole dinosaur lasagna.
A whole dinosaur lasagna. But then furthermore, none of those things are going to taste good by themselves. So that's the main thing, is you should come in with a very rough idea of your character. You can have a cool story. You can have something really cool, but consider what the flaws might be. And you can always flesh it out more later when other things come up.
And so, you know, to really charm this monster, you know, James and I made a couple of notes here about what you can do specifically. So the next character you make, I've got 3 jotted down here, and we'll kind of blow through them pretty quickly, but the first one is actually one that I'm going to do in an upcoming campaign that James is going to be running.
Heyo.
It's going to be in our homebrew world of Dragongrin, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to make a cleric. I've never played a cleric before. So instead of being, I'm the stalwart cleric, I'm very devout, and I know all the spells, and I'll heal you, I thought, I'm actually going to make my character... Well, let me stop right there. Something we didn't hit on that I want to kind of say first. One of the things that a lot of rare and special snowflakes do, they try to make their character where they would be at level 15 at level 3.
Exactly.
So they want this magic weapon, and can I do this, and can I do this, and can I have... And it's like, no, because you're going to enjoy it so much more when you're level 15 and you've slowly gone on the journey to earn that stuff.
Exactly. And I think it's important to note that that can be mechanically, as far as like, okay, magic weapons, and I want 2 attacks even though I don't deserve them, or narratively, or both. The idea that, like we talked about for most of this, where it's like, oh, I've done this, or I'm really good at this, or I'm just great at this.
Right.
It can go both ways as far as in mechanics and just in their narrative.
And the reason why I bring that up is because I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to combat that exact thing. I want to be a level 10 cleric, because your campaign starts, what did you start us at? 5?
3.
So he started
4,
us at...
maybe 4. I don't remember, but...
So
make
I have it
one of
written
those.
down.
Yeah, I have it written down too, exactly. But
the point is that I decided I'm going to make a level 4 cleric who was a level 10, but they retired.
Yeah.
They kind of are just this cleric of a little shanty. There's maybe like a shrine to a deity. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm like a white-haired kind of, you know, not super fit ex-adventurer.
Yeah.
So I thought
you've probably got a rusty mace lying around somewhere.
Exactly. But that's a hack. If you really want to have this traveled character and this person that, the I guess the trade-off is that I'm going to be like, man, I'm not as young as I used to be.
Exactly.
So I'm acting, and I might eventually, if I live that long, maybe I will get up to level 10. But I think that's a cool concept.
Exactly.
Is make a retired hero. Maybe he used to be the best swordsman in the region.
Exactly.
But now he's rusty. And maybe he thinks he is, and that first combat is a really good role-playing encounter.
Yeah, that's
when
the thing.
He gets owned by a level 4.
Yeah, just make your characters real people. I mean, I guess that's just like,
hey,
couldn't be a broader stroke.
Here's some broad generic advice from Tabletop Terrors. Go be better.
Just do it. Come on. Roll the dice better. What are you doing with yourself?
May your dice roll high. So, well, that's the first one, was to make your character retired and have slipped down 5 or 7 levels.
Exactly.
The second one was one that James already touched on. This was his idea. It was, stop trying to be the best in the world at level 3.
Yeah, exactly. I just, that's the important thing is, like, look at yourself right now. I'm not an adventurer. I talk into a microphone for an hour on Sunday. And I go to my job, and that's, you know what I mean? Like, I'm happy with my life, but I'm not slaying monsters with a sword. But the idea is, I'm good, really good at a few things. But if somebody was like, hey, you know, do you think you're the best in the world? I'd be like, first of all, I have no idea. I have no concept of who is the best in the world at some of the things I do. Second of all, I'm probably not the best in the world because I'm not famous for it. You know, it's like, no, a lot of people do some of the things I do, and I'm not the guy that's famous right now, so it's like, well, no, I would assume that I'm not the best in the world. You know, So when you make your character realize that the world is bigger than they are, it's very likely that the world is just much larger than them. You know, they can't be larger than life yet. I mean, when you hit level 10 and level 15, yeah, you're known around the world. But when you're level 3, the mayor in town doesn't even give you the time of day. He doesn't care.
He doesn't care. There's a bunch of level 3s looking to be famous.
Yeah, like you're in line for that interview to go like kill the gnolls in the dungeon. He's like, no, you know what? Commission another adventuring party. Other one didn't show up. You know, the one before that, they died. They never came back. So we're just assuming that they skipped town or died. So no, just send another one in. I don't care about you. Oh, what's your name? Tommy? Timmy? I don't care, Timmy. Listen. Here's some gold. You'll get it when you come back with the heads and the gnolls. If you don't come back, I don't care.
Is this your resume? Oh, you have any headshots? You're looking a little pudgier in real life.
That brings up a really good point. Build your character's resume. And if you would be able to get a senior adventuring job, you're probably not doing it right. You're looking for that entry-level adventuring job.
And this is so here's the way to kind of meet in the middle, though. Because if you have this grandiose idea, the thing that James and I jotted down was, take the concept you have, that exact one you want to be, the fire-breathing Super Ninja Warlock, and then talk to your DM or GM and say, okay, here's where I want to end up.
Exactly.
It's okay to come up with that now, because you're like, well, what do you mean? I imagine myself as this awesome warlock, and that's what made me want to make the character. Okay, describe to your game master, hey, I eventually want to be a very neutral warlock. I want to be very cold, calculated. I want to be awesome at combat, you know, and then start out at the opposite. Exactly. Be indecisive. So that's one way too, is a good trick, is figure out where you want to end up at level 20 and then scale it back to level 3, reversing all of it.
Yeah. Work backwards.
Yeah. That's a really good way to do it. And then, the final one, and this is another way, because one of the main reasons that they want to be rare and special snowflakes is because they don't want to be a trope. They don't want to be a stereotypical, like, Strider from Lord of the Rings or Drizzt from Forgotten Realms. So they're like, well, how can I be different? Well, I want to be a dragonborn who's inverted. All of my organs are outside my body. It's like,
that's unique.
Oh, wow, you're a science class diagram dragon.
But I feel like that is unique, too unique in the wrong direction. You know, like, that has no great character implications for me personally.
No, because...
Granted, that's a joke idea, but I see what you're getting at.
Well, because the number one question I would have every NPC ask is, does that hurt? That would be the thing that everyone asks them all the time.
Yeah.
So here's the idea that James and I came up with. Start out as the trope.
Yeah.
And then slowly change. Start out as the dwarven axe-wielding Gimli who's like, oh, I'll just kill all the orcs. And then have that person, or that dwarf, have an encounter that makes them weirdly empathize with dwarves. Nope, I meant to say orcs. Basically what I'm saying is be the trope, and then slowly over 20 levels, change parts of you through the adventures and through the situations and encounters.
Exactly. And sort of what we touched on before is, as you go, you're going to be met with instances where your character needs to make a decision, usually a role-playing decision. So in my mind, the way I like to look at it is my character is built by when he acts outside of character. You know, when I first started playing D&D, I was always afraid because I thought, well, would my character do that? You know, is that something you would do? And I would always be thinking that, and I would always be indecisive. But what I realized is the fact that my character before this instance wouldn't have done it is what makes it great.
Right.
If I'm generally, okay, like I kill orcs on sight, I just hate them. And then I see one, you know, maybe saving someone or not acting inherently evil or otherwise, if I see a half orc and I immediately am upset, but then they're, you know, very nice and stuff. It's like the fact that my character is beginning to rethink his very deeply seated, you know, traits already.
Right.
I'm building a character.
Exactly.
You know, you can start exactly like you said, start out as a trope, start out, you hate orcs and, you know, you just, whatever your things are, but see what challenges them as you go. You know, you don't have to flesh out your character 100%. You can always say, oh, you know, you come across this, you know, woman that needs help And you can decide, okay, well, there was an instance in my childhood where this happened that, means that I would react this way. It's the kind of thing where you're constantly making up your character. It's not set in stone right when you start.
Yeah, that's another good point, is that you don't have to have it all figured out. When I start all of my characters, I figure out who they are today.
Exactly.
With a little bit of background. And I know that that's probably not the way some people do it, and that's fine. But I like to leave that stuff open because I find opportunities to fill in those circles.
Exactly.
Leave the circles open and then, fill it in with this, and you're building this mosaic.
Exactly. And you can decide, okay, well, like one main event that made your character become an adventurer, or you can certainly flesh out as much as you want, but if you're playing a, 35-year-old Dragonborn and you fleshed out 1 year of your life, it's 34 more years that you have to put whatever you want.
Exactly. So in closing, rare and special snowflakes, as Tyler Durden would say, we are not them. We're all the same decaying organic matter.
Exactly. The idea is, if I want to have fun, I cannot make a rare and special snowflake.
No, I would feel like I was like, wow, this is... I wouldn't feel as though I had an opportunity to be flawed if my rare and special snowflakiness was such a spotlight stealer the whole time.
Exactly.
I just feel like I wouldn't have an opportunity to unfurl, or I don't know.
Yeah, you would have the word you're looking for, Tim, is grow. You'd have no opportunity as a character to grow. But it comes back down to, okay, don't make a character that it becomes a matter of when you're going to solve a problem. It becomes a matter of how. Make a character that can't solve every problem. Make a character that can solve one thing really well, but needs the help of his teammates, the other adventurers, other NPCs, to make sure he makes it.
That's a really good way to put it.
Be just one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I love that. And so in closing, I guess, again, which I said in closing probably 3 times, but really in closing, what I will say is this. There are some rare and special snowflakes that there's no fixing. If you're the inverted dragonborn fox with wings who has, his adventuring party, lives in his sword, the last one that died, and all, like, dude, just rethink that character. Just start over.
Yeah, okay.
They're like, I want to be a half gnome lizard face with sword hands, and it's like, no, you're way off base to start with. Let's just stick with the printed guidelines within the books.
Yeah.
So for you folks out there, we're just going to tease you. We're not going to help you. No, I'm kidding. Hopefully this podcast helped. Hopefully it made sense. Hopefully you understand that the best way to be rare and unique is with your own set of flaws. And by using those flaws to grow and change and be shaped by your environment.
Exactly.
Well, this has been Charm Monster. Thanks so much for listening. As always, you can, take a look at absolutetabletop.com, tabletopterrors.com, absolutetabletop.com as well. And so, in the meantime, may your dice roll high. And I got to go do some Southern DMing now.
Southern Provoker, Comfort, DM, conspiracy theories.
Let's do it big.